Ronnie Mclaughlin, a sought-after public speaker, has been the keynote presenter for many educational, corporate, and nonprofit entities. Ronnie specializes in team building and developing leaders by following business strategy models. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, organizational change management, and effective communication skills are just a few workshop classes designed to effect change for the betterment of the organization. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome my guest, motivational speaker and leadership developer, Ronnie Mclaughlin. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us right here on the Mike Lee Show, powered by IOM Network. And today, I've got my dear friend with us, Ronnie Mac, Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Incredible. How you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Mr. Mike Lee. Thank you for having me today on the Mike Lee Show. I'm extremely honored. I've been telling you this for the past few weeks when this was only an idea or discussion. Right. And I am just so honored to be here today.
Thank you very much. Well, I am very honored to have you here today. You've been doing some really great things in the community and with your life, period. And I can go on and on with our youth, the school system, Black men, and you've owned businesses. You've done an exquisite amount of things in your life and with your career. So we want to talk about some of those things today. Other than that, how are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm in a new space. About a week ago, I moved to the greater Miami area. So I left Atlanta, Georgia.
Unbelievable.
I'm in Miami / Jurassic Park.
Right. Why did you decide to become a teacher? Of all the things that you could be and do, and teaching is a that's a lot. It takes on a lot because you're dealing with other people's, children. You're dealing with so much that go on in the school system, and there's always a plight to fight for, for education and all those things. So why did you want to become a teacher?
That's a very good question. I was almost afraid that you would ask that. Mm-hmm. I honestly did not know what I was getting myself into. Mm-hmm. I have two brothers, one older brother that graduated, of course, from college before I did. And when I graduated, I really didn't know which way I was going to go. My undergrad is in psychology, and I was being prepped for family life education and to open a practice as a family life educator, almost somewhat like a practitioner, but I'm educating the family. But I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. My older brother had began his teaching career. So most of us wants to be like our older brother, and bam, I'm a teacher. And that's how it happened. I was following after him.
Wow. What is different from you and your brother? What's your philosophy as a teacher, your teaching style, your philosophy? What makes
the difference is that I stayed the course. He began his teaching career, and somewhere in the process of his career, he felt the call to the pastorate. And so he went on to seminary and started a church, and I remain in education. And this is far back as 1997. This is not gray, this is blonde. As I'm giving dates. Right. This is blonde, this is not gray.
Not gray, right? Right. And you've been teaching for, I would say, it's been 15 years or longer?
Since 97.
Wow.
And I started in middle school, and then from middle school went to high school. I've also taught a little bit of seminary. There was a space in time where my brother and I taught side by side in seminary. And then I taught confectionery arts. And then I went into higher education, which is where I currently am now, so to speak. but I did go into higher education.
Now, with your tenure and long tenure, what has changed since you started teaching? Are teachers getting the support they need? School funding, staff safety? What has changed since you started?
Awesome question. When I started off in teaching, I remember days where we would have partner teachers. And a partner teacher is where you would have two teachers, for example, in the corridors,
Mm-hmm.
you would have a classroom on one side, another class on the other,
Mm-hmm.
and the teachers would leave their doors open in the middle and they would swap. So one teacher over here would do English and the other
Mm-hmm.
teacher would do social studies, and then they would swap. The students would remain where they were, but the teachers would swap rooms. What has changed? A lot has changed even now due to this pandemic that we're
Mm-hmm.
still in. A lot has changed. And over the last couple of days, I was thinking how fear has infiltrated
Mm-hmm.
the school system, has infiltrated the classroom. I was talking with a principal just yesterday, and she was saying how in her classrooms, the students are divided by plexiglass. All of their desks are encased in plexiglass. I was speaking with a parent who said that their child was in daycare, and the child, they believe, had a pretty strong immune system. But one day the child came home with a very, very bad cold, where this child contracted this virus from another student. You know, kids, they interact, they play with one another, and
Mm-hmm.
this child brought this virus into the house. And so, therefore, the parents want to separate or isolate their child from that particular setting. Fear has set in where everyone has this, give me 50 feet, give me 50 feet.
Yeah.
So now you have classroom sizes that are minimized. The desks are now separated, they're moved apart. Some teachers don't know to send their students into the cafeteria, send them to the gymnasium, or just keep them isolated in the classroom. You have teachers that are afraid or fearful going into a classroom now. You have teachers, therefore, the job. So, what has changed? So many things have changed. You may remember coming up in school where the teacher acted almost as your parent.
Mm-hmm.
They would chastise us. I was paddled.
Oh,
Were
me
you
too.
ever paddled?
Of course. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Do you remember how thick that paddle was?
absolutely. Oh, yeah. There were times when
But now,
I would say, well, not that I would plan to be bad, but I'm like, I may want to put on two pair of pants today, just in case if I get battled. Of course, I
right,
remember that.
right.
Yeah,
But now teachers are afraid to bring discipline,
yeah,
classroom management,
uh,
as it is called, because these kids today, they're no longer kids. They feel as though they're grown, just as grown as the teacher. Students today will fight teachers. So the teacher being the authoritarian in the classroom, that has changed. Where the teacher, when I came up, was the counselor, the lawyer, the advocator, the provider. That has changed. When we came up, teachers would console a student, hug a student, praise a student. Now the teacher is afraid to get too close. So a lot of things have changed in the school system, and the children are suffering greatly because of that.
I've been watching a few things on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
Um, there's a situation where this child has a backpack on. He walks down the hallway. A
I
teacher
saw
run.
that.
I knew you would have. I knew it. The teacher runs out of the classroom. He chastises the student a little bit and he slaps him. Now I don't know what could have gone on in that room. I don't know of anything that would support what I saw, but I know that there's always two sides to everything. And I'm a bit, and not that any way that I'm saying that I support what that teacher did, but what is going on with our kids from a mental health standpoint? Because they do come to school with a lot more baggage, a lot more authority that you can't tell me what to do, or I'm going to run over your class. I'm going to destroy your class. I'm going to throw things around. I'm going to disrupt the environment. What is your take on that? And from a mental health standpoint, what is going on? This is without COVID. This COVID had nothing to do, and we're going to talk about some things that COVID has done,
Oh yeah.
also. But this is pre-COVID that our kids are, and I feel bad for our kids because they're taking on a responsibility that they don't have to, as being adults, knowing more than the teacher, coming in and disrespecting the teacher in the class, not having any sort of respect. What is your take on that?
I started in education November 1997. My
Hmm.
stepdad had just passed away.
Hmm.
And I started off in November of 97. I remember the very first school I taught at. And at this particular school, I had a student who was only in the sixth grade, and he was a little bitty guy, but he
Hmm.
terrorized the building.
Hmm.
Everyone knew who he was. But through the power of God, I was able to develop a rapport with him. Although he consistently stayed in trouble with the other teachers, when he came to my classroom, he was an angel. And so one day, his mother came up to the school. I'm at my desk. The assistant principal brought her to my door, and I looked at the door and I called out his name and I said, "He's in trouble again." And so
Hmm.
they called me out in the hallway to tell me that they found him hanging in his closet.
Hmm.
So when you talk about mental health
Yeah.
and students having baggage and bringing baggage to the school and to the classroom, is not just the students that's bringing baggage to the classroom, it's also the adult,
The
the teacher.
teacher. Oh, wow.
Because I remember when I started off in education, and most people know this, that teachers are probably some of the most underpaid workers
Yeah.
there is on the planet. So I'm working by day and I'm also working by night. Um, so many teachers come into the classroom with, how am I going to pay my bills? I have relationship issues, problems with my kids, problems in the classroom. Then on the flip, you have
Wow.
the students bringing their issues to the classroom, being raised by a single parent, raising their fellow siblings, having to feed them, or the shortage of food in the home. So if we were right quickly to look at the school as a symbol, the building itself, and you have the children coming to that building, you have the teachers coming to that building, the principals, everyone is coming into this one building with their truth,
Mm.
with their baggage. It takes the practitioner, the teacher, needing to have the strength, the courage, the tools, the wherewithal to deal with their inner struggles, to be able to face or to facilitate what the deterrent is with the children not being able to comprehend, not being able to learn. If that child comes in that classroom and they take a seat, but they know that when they get home, there is no food, or their father is incarcerated, or their brother was just shot, and this happens, this is a reality. How are they going to comprehend what 4 times 2 divided by 3? They don't want to hear that. But it takes a
Wow.
seasoned educator to be able to lock into that student and help them try to gain composure and understand that the teacher is there, they're concerned, and they're help them to deal with those things that seem to be larger than life.
All of the things that they may have to face when they leave. All of the things you said. What if there's abuse in the home? they have to go back and face abuse and they don't want to, and they're
Correct.
acting out in class. They're acting out for a reason. There's a
Yes.
reason why
Yes.
they're not just acting out because, hey, I want to destroy the room
Oh,
today.
no, 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 no,
There's
no,
a
no.
reason why
Yes.
they're
All
acting
the
out,
way.
and I want to thank you for just pointing those things out, because we need to, as we watch videos like that I saw today, we
Hmm.
need to have compassion for both parties, the student and the teacher. Because you're right, those teachers come in with a bunch of baggage themselves, like you
Oh,
say,
yeah.
the pay, this, that, and the other. And when
Yes.
you can't pay your bills and you still
Yes.
have to come in and possibly buy tablets,
Yes.
pencils, or pay
Yes.
for supplies, and you're reaching in your pocket and you don't have the money, and
Right.
then you're having to screw your brain on and go, I'm going to
Right.
deal with this. And here Carl or Tanisha comes in with their problem. There's a clash.
And something you just said,
Hmm.
you said this is pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
So let's just bring that recipe that we just cooked up. If we just looked at the school symbol and the building where the children are coming to this building, they're bringing their baggage, the teachers, administrators come into this building with their baggage, pandemic happens and disbands everything. So if this building was a symbol of a safe haven for certain inner city Title I schools,
Hmm.
Title I means low income.
Hmm.
So the child knows if I'm not getting a meal anyplace, I'm getting it at
Go to
school.
school. Yeah.
If I'm not being heard, I'm being heard at school because there's a counselor, I have a teacher, there's administrators. Someone should be able to hear and understand my frustration. But let's bring now COVID-19 on top of that to disband the entire world. It separated me from my family. I'm sure probably separated you from yours. Everyone went into their neutral corners, fear factor. I
Hmm.
don't want it. You don't want it. So stay home. So now you have where children before the pandemic would be in the school building more hours of the day with the teacher than with their parent. Now they're home those daytime hours, 8 hours on average, at home now more so. So if leaving home and going to school was for safety, things happen in the house for some kids where I want to get up and go to school in the morning to get out of this. So, what has happened in this pandemic now? Talk to social workers. We have child abuse at an all-time high. I have social worker friends who says, a few of them, that says they're seeing more limbs broken, trips down the staircase. So many incidences of them calling the police to rescue these children because the list just goes on and on and on. The parents would send the children off to school to be taught by a teacher, but now the parent, and so now the parent is a parent and a teacher that they've never ever been a teacher
No
before.
training whatsoever. Nothing. Wow.
This is deep, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is pretty heavy.
Now that is what the pandemic did. Now let's talk about that, because that has caused a spike in domestic violence, death, even, because I've seen cases where parents have called the police on their children, and by the
Yes,
time the police gets there, it's
yes,
escalated, and the
yes,
child is now being shot by the police, and the
yes,
police are not using tasers. They're not
yes,
shooting them in the leg. They're not
yes.
going. Some of the kids have had mental health issues where they have knives or certain things, and these children have been shot and killed. Um, Talk about that a little bit and how this has impacted the school system and everything at abroad.
So the pandemic happened. Well, we were introduced to this coronavirus
Uh huh.
end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And when this happened, it just brought a heightened awareness of the Great Divide. There was always a lack of resources in the inner city, where certain schools were always privy to technology, to advanced knowledge in computer science, while the inner city kids did not have this. I've gone into schools and classrooms where they didn't have textbooks, or if they did, they were out of date textbooks. So that's another show. I mean, this thing gets so deep. So now the pandemic happens, everyone is disbanded. So now we have what is called this virtual space or this virtual learning. My head is about to explode. And I say this because these children were sent home for virtual learning where parents were never teachers. You have some parents, God bless them, have only gone as high themselves as a 5th grade or 8th grade education. So how do they help their child with algebra, trigonometry? And now let's take this very basic. If it is the school that teaches a kindergartner how to learn the alphabets, or to learn the vowels, to learn the sounds of the alphabets, how to spell their name, how does a kindergartner go virtual?
Exactly.
How do you tell a 1st grader, oh, type this on a computer? They're just learning how to spell. Absolutely. You understand what I'm saying? Absolutely. This thing is so deep. So then when everyone was disbanded and they're speaking now about a virtual space, there were a number of school districts that couldn't go virtual anyway. They never had the technology. So what they did was they came up with what they call homework packets. Homework packets, and you know that you had this when we were coming up in school, busy work. Xerox copies of busy work. And in this process, we're talking about a good solid year or more. You, as a teacher, you can't grade anything. How do you grade the student? Right. You have some that went virtual, some that can't go virtual. And even in the cases where some could go virtual, what happens when that technology breaks down? You have cable in your house. Does your cable ever blink out? Does your Wi-Fi ever go out? Or what happens when the student's curriculum blinks out?
Yeah.
How does a virtual educator gain the attention and keep the attention of a 2nd grader, 3rd grader? This is another plight of a parent that is sitting their child in front of a computer and the child has ADD, or the child has some other learning disability. The parent is working and have to assist the child in front of a computer to keep their eyes on their teacher. You see how deep this thing is?
Absolutely. Oh my God.
So we could talk about global warming. We could talk about the homeless crisis in the United States of America. We could talk about coronavirus. We could talk about vaccination. But this issue with education, or the lack thereof, especially with our inner city kids, is going to be bigger than anyone could ever fathom, because there are huge gaps in the learning process now because of COVID-19.
Wow. We are going to take a small break, because I think everybody needs to probably digest and look, figure out what we just did, what we just talked about, digest this. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with more of Ron Mack, and we're going to be talking more about this situation. We'll be right back.
If you're watching this with your friends, you'll probably make a joke.
Because you know what you feel on the inside
isn't what you want people to know.
If you have to pretend to be happy,
find someone you trust and tell them.
If you get mad at things and you don't know why. Or have thoughts about hurting yourself?
Find someone you trust and tell them.
You are never alone when you share.
Seriously, people care about you.
It's okay to not understand what you're feeling.
And it's easy to think that you're all alone.
But you don't have to be.
You're never alone when you share.
Don't be ashamed to tell someone you trust what you're feeling.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Find someone you trust and tell them.
Tell a parent.
Tell a teacher. Tell a brother or sister.
Or just tell a friend.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Talk to someone.
Talk to someone.
It's how things get better.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us right here on the Mike Lee Show, powered by IOM Network. And we are back with Mr. Ron Mclaughlin. Ron, how are you, sir? And thank you for joining us tonight. We just unpacked a lot in that first segment, and we're going to come back here with and unpack even more. If you're just joining us, this is the Mike Lee Show, and we were talking about some things that are going on in the school system, how it's impacting teachers and students. We're talking about COVID in the school systems, and we are just talking about a lot in what teachers and students are going through during COVID. And one of the things I wanted to touch on tonight was, if you could define for our listeners, what is social emotional learning, and how is that? I mean, tell us about that.
I'll keep it plain and simple.
Okay.
Social emotional learning involves the development of critical life skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. I worked in South Central. I started off in the Detroit public school system, and then I later was recruited by LAUSD, Los Angeles Unified School District. I was assigned to a high school in South Central. So if you remember Rodney King.
I was there.
I was working at a school there, not far from where the incident took place.
Mm-hmm.
And there, my population there in Detroit, my population was predominantly African American. In LA, my student population was predominantly Latino. And this population actually was ESL students, English as second language. So they were learning English. So this is a prime example of critical life skills, where we were teaching them, of course, history, math, all of that, but we also was teaching them computer skills, job skills, how to apply for a job, interviewing skills. We were preparing them for the real world. And there in South Central, it was key because my student population there thought their life's mission was being in a gang. Mm-hmm. Because that's all they saw. That's all they knew. So it was very critical for them developing life skills, which is also, if you think about it, it is also the basis of, if you think of it this way, elementary is preparing you for middle school, high school, college, but then also life, the real world. And in high school, we're doing just that as well. We're preparing them for the real world. Hopefully, we do want them to go into higher education, but we are preparing them to work a job and preparing them to enter into the world.
Gotcha. Outside of COVID.
Yes.
Outside of COVID, what are some of the greatest challenges that teachers are facing right now?
The lack of support.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of support, and I just cannot put this all in one basket,
mm-hmm.
because it takes a community, and the actual community where the school itself resides, the local community should be proactive in that particular school's functions, in its functionality. I'll give you an example. I just recently moved here to Southern Florida, and most school systems would have a town hall meeting. The town hall meeting is where the community is invited to come and congregate to meet with the superintendent, the principal, the teachers, and that's where they would voice their complaints. I know you just said outside of COVID, but I'm just want to bring something home.
No, please.
This particular town hall meeting here was just recently on the news, where we're dealing with, do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? And so there's this one special individual, this male from the community, came to the town hall meeting saying, we're against wearing masks, to the extent that he took all of his clothes off at the town hall meeting to say, we're not going to wear masks and we're not going to wear our clothes.
Okay.
How about that for a big message? So one of the things that the teachers are suffering from, as I was leading to, is support from the community. And then, of course, support from top down, from the superintendent, from the district office. There needs to be support. And honestly, that could make or break a teacher. The lack thereof could cause them to, hey, at the end of the school year, deuces.
Right. Now, you made me think. You're making me think outside of the box here. We talk about the school, where it sits, and the community.
Yes.
And I think about when we vote. And when we vote, we only think about the president.
Right.
We're going to vote for president. But how does voting impact the school system, and what sort of benefits that the school is getting? Can we elaborate on that? People that will be able to give funding to the school. Does voting have anything to do with that?
And it's funny you should say that, because I've seen a number of superintendents as well as school principals walk through a revolving door. I've seen schools go through more than one principal in just one school year. And that's very disheartening, because if you were to look at it this way, you have a body. How does the head detach itself from the body?
Yes.
When the head is the central control unit of the body. And so I've seen schools suffer greatly because you've had a principal here manding his or her posts, and then for whatever reason is made to leave. And all hell and havoc then breaks out. But it's very important. The community has a strong voice within that local school. And believe it or not, you know, when people are house hunting, they will look for a house based upon that particular school or school district. They will look to see how that school or school district ranks. Did you know that? That people could go in the local paper and see where that school ranks. So, man, we really don't have enough time to discuss this thing today, because if they are able to look at statistics of this particular school, and these statistics are based on test scores, where now the pandemic has these scores running amok globally. We're in a real big mess, and I can't stress that enough. You see how I keep back to the core of this thing?
Absolutely.
That we need solutions brought to the school system. And I know we're not there yet, but I just want to put in this plug that at this juncture, my heart bleeds for the children that are greatly suffering. And there's going to continue to be a gap. There's going to continue to be a loss of instruction. And the students are the primary stakeholders. Without students, we don't have a school, but they're suffering. And so I'm here because I've been in education so long. I'm here with solutions for the superintendents, solutions for the teachers, solutions for the students. They're all burnt out. Teachers are walking away. Have you seen reports like that lately? Vacancies, teacher vacancies, superintendent vacancies. We have superintendents that are walking away from their retirement because of stress due to COVID restrictions that are changing every week, due to test scores that are up and down like a roller coaster. You know, there's such a great loss that is happening right now where people just don't know what to do anymore.
Outside of what we talked about a little bit about the voting, and thank you for answering that question. What else can the community do?
Good question. So I've worked in inner city, low performing at-risk schools. And then I've also worked in the suburbanites, other areas where the grass is greener. And guess what happens in those communities? The doors of those homes are literally left open. I was working at one school where the school had a relay race, and the students were running through. It was very controlled, it was organized, but it was a fundraiser, and they were running through the community, through the residential area. These homeowners were out on their lawns. They were up at the school participating. They were bringing cookies, donuts. They were actively involved. So to answer your question, what can the community do? The community can participate, can be present. They can volunteer. When I came up as a student in the public school system, I remember when volunteers came up to your school as a child? Remember that when you were coming up? Elementary, middle school, remember how they would assist the teacher at times? This was long before there were parapros, as they're called now, paraprofessionals. We had volunteers, parents that would volunteer. People in the community would come up and make sure that no one was running down the hallway. Or how about this? If a certain child was wreaking havoc in the school, the parent would come in and sit in the classroom, terrorize their child. Remember that?
I remember that.
So that's another change that has happened where we don't get the parent volunteers anymore. We don't get the parent participation. We really don't see the participation in the community as much. And that's one thing that could really help the school to further the educational process if they will all play a part. We live in a day where parents would drop their kids off to school and leave all the responsibility on this teacher that in one classroom setting could have 15, 20, 25 students, first period, then second period, another group come in, third period, another group. So, you know, on any given day, one teacher could be seeing nearly 100 students. So having volunteers, the help and the support of the community, if they would come in and sit on some of these leadership meetings so that their voices could be heard, I think a lot of change would come about.
Very good. What steps have schools taken to continue the learning process during the pandemic?
Steps such as one of the steps in the inner city schools, they understood that they were there to feed the children. And so throughout the school year, they had meeting places for those kids to come to get a lunch and go back home. Some schools were still able to do it even throughout the summer. But then they were also able to allow the kids to go virtual. Some schools were able to give the children resources such as iPads or laptops to take home. So these are some of the things that some schools could do. For those schools that were not equipped in doing so, they prepared homework packets for the kids to take home, but there's still a crisis afoot. You can't just throw a book at them for them to go home and teach themselves. And then you also cannot give a student a homework packet until you first teach them in a controlled environment and then give them homework over what they've been taught in the classroom first. How do you give them a homework assignment when they weren't taught the basis first in a controlled environment?
Yeah.
So when this pandemic happened, if I could just interject there and say this, I was living in a community, a gated community in Atlanta, and my neighbors next door were actual college students. And they were attending a university there in Atlanta. And when the pandemic was in full force with this coronavirus scare, the school just abruptly shut down. So imagine this. International students in the US, specifically in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, they're at school and then the school just shuts down. Or you have students in school in Georgia, but they're from Philadelphia or from New York or from Washington, and the dorms close. The student center closed. That's where they're fed every day. So there were students that were out on the street.
Wow.
Now, if I'm a college student and I know that I'm enrolling in University of the ABCs and I'm low on funds, I apply for financial aid. And it may come in the form of a Pell Grant by way of the government. The government sends those funds to the schools, and whatever's left over come to me. Pandemic happened. Government has already sent my money to the school, and in some cases, schools have shut down with monies that was sent there for me.
So where does the money go?
Details at 11. We have to discuss that at another day and time because I'm still trying to find that.
Wow.
Because I know that those same students that were once my neighbors, they had to leave and go home. And they were telling me issues and stories of students that were there from other countries, students that were there from other states where they did not have food. They had no place to sleep.
This is here in America.
This is a crisis. This is a real crisis. And if we discussed this over the break, for anyone who says, I am a single adult, I'm not responsible for no one but myself, that is false. If you say, oh, I don't have any kids, I don't have a godson, a goddaughter, I did not bring any children into the world, this still affects you. It affects all of us. Because these are the kids that were to grow up and get a job at that same Chick-fil-A that some of us go to, or the car wash, or the mall. And if there are gaps in instruction and we're missing certain things, how would they have that foundation? If they were to get a job at Chick-fil-A or get a job at Home Depot and there's a power outage and that register does not tell them things that their brain should already tell them.
They're relying on the computer to tell them what to give back. Power outage. Now what are you doing? Now what are you
exactly
going to do?
Remember the life skill you were talking about, social, economic learning, things like this. It affects us. It affects us all. It affects us greatly when we've been telling children for years that education is their future and they are investing in their future. But when there are guns aimed at the educational process and they're not getting the attention that they need, they're not getting the tools that they need, then their future is at stake. And if this is a problem.
I just had an aha moment sitting here thinking about what you just said. And you're right. It has always impacted all of us.
Oh, yes.
And what I thought about sometimes when we say, when we go to a McDonald's and we go through a drive-through, or we go through a certain part of a restaurant or whatever, and someone gives us bad service, or we're wondering why is that person not saying not friendly enough, or why is this person leaning on the counter while I'm standing here. All of this is the same behavior that they brought from home, from school, into the workplace, and now we have to reap the benefits of that. Because if they can't spew it out at home, if they can't spew it out at school, where else are they going to take it?
But see, that's the whole thing about the classroom. Yeah. That's why the classroom is the womb of learning. Yeah. The classroom for the student is the workplace for the adults. Yeah. So in the classroom, the student learns social skills. They learn how not to speak out of turn. They learn how not to touch another student abruptly or to mishandle them. They learn how to raise their hand or to wait to be acknowledged. If that does not happen, they miss out on that learning process. It's not just math, science, history, it's social skills. And something I learned the other day by watching American Idol, Lionel Richie said, not everyone can be a basketball player.
That's right.
So there's some people that need to learn algebra. Some people need to learn chemistry because not everybody's going to throw a football.
Yeah.
And if they're not giving this opportunity, God help us.
We're going to take a break and we'll come back more with Mr. Ron Mclaughlin. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Smith, the Associate Dean of Graduate Medical Education at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University. There's a lot of misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine, so it's critical that you get the facts from sources you can trust. Here's one misconception, that the vaccine will alter your DNA. This is false. The current vaccines are mRNA vaccines, which provide a genetic code for your body to produce a protein. In this case, the COVID spike. Once that genetic code is done producing the COVID spike protein, it's eventually degraded by your body, and therefore it does not stick around, and it cannot change your DNA. The ultimate goal is to have your body develop an immune system response to those COVID spikes by forming antibodies against it. With this immune system memory, every time your body sees COVID, you will have fighter antibodies that remember the COVID spikes. This will protect you from getting lethally sick. That's the truth. The COVID-19 vaccine is safe, effective, and our best chances at protecting ourselves and getting back to normal. So before you make up your mind, know your facts.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. We're back with none other than Mr. Ronnie Mclaughlin, and we are here talking about teachers, the pandemic, the school system, and how it impacts our students. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about all those things that you can imagine about what goes on in the classroom, sometimes when it's functional or dysfunctional. And right now, Mr. Mclaughlin, who is a teacher and who has done so many great things with students and with what he does, is here to kind of help us with a lot of questions that we had tonight. So again, Mr. Mclaughlin, thank you for joining us tonight. And I want to pick up with, I want to talk a little bit about K-12 and how it's different from higher education. Can you help us to understand about K-12 and how that all works?
How is K-12 different from higher education? Mm-hmm. I view K-12 as a baby. Mm-hmm. And that baby is absolutely dependent and reliant upon its mother. Mm-hmm. The baby depends on its mother for nourishment. Mm-hmm. And that's K-12. K-12 is reliant upon the teacher for their identity, mm-hmm. for their maturation in whatever career field they feel they're called to. And let me give reference to that. I remember my fourth grade teacher speaking prophetically over me one day.
Mm-hmm.
She saw greatness in me. Her name was Miss Brooks. I'll never forget this.
Mm-hmm.
This was at Cadillac Elementary School many years ago. I'm sorry, Healy Elementary. That's the name, Healy Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
And at Healy Elementary one day, Miss Brooks, she said, "Ronnie, you're going to be on the radio. And if there's anything I could do to make sure this happens, I'm going to do it."
Mm-hmm.
Everything this lady spoke prophetically over me did happen.
Wow.
I've been on the radio. I've been on the radio to discuss cookbooks that I've written.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on the radio to discuss health and nutrition. Everything this lady saw. She saw me on instruments. She had me playing the flute, had me playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
Later, my mom had me going through piano courses. What is the difference between K-12 and higher education?
Mm-hmm.
Higher education is more self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I went through a master's program
Mm-hmm.
that was online. It was virtual, and there I chimed in when I wanted to, submitted the homework when I had the time to.
Mm-hmm.
K-12 is reliant on someone to communicate effectively the fundamentals of history, of mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
of science. Another difference of K-12 and higher education, as I mentioned, in K-12, I'm being fashioned for my future. In higher education, I'm walking into it.
Okay.
So in K-12, if I have Michael Jordan, who was being groomed as he was coming up through the ranks to be one of the world's greatest basketball players ever.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time he made it to college, everybody knew this was a star player.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So K-12, we are molding them. We're shaping them. So if you see, I keep going right back to the same thing. So if that school building, as I mentioned as a symbol, if K through 12 is not intact, if it's not whole, then how are we properly servicing these students?
Mm-hmm.
So it takes someone such as myself, a Ron Mack, that understands that this is not a job, this is a calling,
Mm-hmm.
to go back into the school system with solutions. And that's what I'm doing today, Mike Lee. And that's why I thank you so much for this space and time today. I feel the call, the passion, the fervor to offer solutions. Teachers needs to be heard just like the students.
Yeah.
The superintendents are looking for answers to their questions. Because as I mentioned today, and this is on a number of reports where there are teacher vacancies,
Mm-hmm.
superintendents are walking out.
Mm-hmm.
I have a superintendent friend who lives in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
who says a number of his superintendent fellows walking out the door,
Mm-hmm.
burnt out, frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
faced with more questions than answers, and it's gonna take effective communication.
Yes.
Something as simple as all of us coming down to the table. So for those of you, if I could take this second to have this commercial break, for those of you school leaders, for those of you superintendents, teachers, for those of you decision makers, stakeholders that are watching this interview, we have solutions that we can bring to your school district.
Mm-hmm.
Solutions that we can bring to your schools. We have a motivational message that we want to bring to your student body,
Mm-hmm.
to bring those broken, missing pieces back together again.
Mm-hmm.
We'll speak to you in just a few minutes to give you our contact information.
Excellent.
But we certainly have plans, we have curriculum, we
Mm-hmm.
also have seminars, and we have platforms
Mm-hmm.
where we can share with you to reinvigorate you teachers that are burnt out and to bring solutions to you principals as well.
Excellent. What have you personally sacrificed to do what you've done for 15 years? There had to have been some form of sacrifice that you had to have endured yourself as a human being, as a giver, nurturer, someone who cares about the system, someone who cares about children, and other teachers. So, what has been your sacrifice?
Time. Time is the most valuable commodity that we all have. I started off in Detroit public school system. That was my home. So there, I'm speaking to my own community, speaking to my own people. And you and I might, because we're in the same community, we're both African American, we can speak to each other without even opening up our mouths.
Wow, it's the way we look
can
at
give each other a
look, yes,
an expression.
Yeah, you're right.
So we know what that means.
Yeah.
But then when I was recruited to work in South Central, where these people spoke Spanish first, I had to be able some way, somehow to gain a rapport with these high school students that just knew they were destined to be gang members. So I had to sacrifice time, even on the weekends, to deal with my students, show them how to get a job, how to enter the workforce, how to write a resume. So one of the greatest sacrifices that I have ever made is time for myself.
What would you change about the school system? If you could put your finger on it right now, what would you change? We're changing that right now.
I would take us back in time. I would take us back to the day where we were all more hands-on. Teacher, parents. When I came up in school, there were parents that were right there in the room with the teacher. I remember that. I remember when it was someone's birthday, the whole class had a party. You remember those days? It was one big community.
I remember sock hops. I remember in the gym when there would be parties, you would throw dances.
Yes.
There would be entertainment. There would be a list, the teacher's list. You had to beg, fight. Put me on the list. We got to dance. We got a group.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore, does it?
No.
That's a crime and a shame. That was what, outside of the curriculum, that was what we lived to go to school for. It was a community, there of us kids just wanting something to do there at school other than just come there just to learn. We were coming there to learn because we had to, but in the midst of having to, we needed to survive and thrive off of each other. And a lot of that had to do simply with just entertaining each other, or enjoying each other, or enjoying our teachers as well as our peers. So it's a shame that that's not there anymore.
And this is one of my sessions that I speak about, the symbol of that school building. Because of what you just said, what you got out of that building, it was more than just math, history, science. It was a community. I remember days when we would drive past the school. That's my school.
My school. And you said it just like that, Ron. My school.
Yes.
Yeah.
That building itself was a symbol of strength. That's where where I met my friends. That's where I had the fear, this reverence for my teacher. And if you ever went past on your bike, and you saw graffiti on the building, you had this anger. Like, who would do this to my building?
To my building, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I would take us back to that day, because that was a great learning environment, atmosphere. That's where the atmosphere was conducive to learning. That's where the community was so very much involved, and children today don't know anything about that.
Yeah, that's sad. What has been your greatest accomplishment as a teacher?
My greatest accomplishment is gaining a rapport, building this trust with my students, where if they were sad, they would confide in me. If they were glad, they would confide in me. If they had something to get off their chest, they would confide in me. And it's just so powerful because I remember teaching in high school where I had students coming in my classroom that was not on my roster. There was this noise abroad. You know how the Bible speaks about Jesus and it would say there was his fame that went out, or there was a noise abroad. So there was this noise abroad in the school about Mr. Mack, and the kids just had to be in Mr. Mack's class. And one day I was going down the attendance list and I'm saying, now I'm calling out these names, but these people are not raising their hands yet. And I asked this one girl, is this your class? No, I just wanted to sit in here.
Wow.
And this happened everywhere. I've had parents come to me with pots of food, dishes I could never even name. So that is right there one of the greatest rewards ever. When you connect with your student population, it's the greatest thing in the world.
I agree. Any last words before we end this session, because you will be back? This might even be a part 2. I don't know. We've had such a great discussion tonight. Such a great discussion. Any last words before you leave? Any last words of hope? Any last words of what the audience may need to know? What's a new step for them in dealing with any issues with their community, school, this pandemic, education, mental illness, and how we can all work together with our school system and the community?
Right now, the gas prices are as high as I have ever seen in all of my 22 years of living on this earth. Blonde, not gray. And so we are expecting Biden to address and bring resolution to the gas price when really this is not a Biden issue.
Right.
There's an issue, there's a crisis afoot with our children, with our students, and they're suffering greatly. And it's going to take every one of us to take an active role in saving this generation. There were graduation dates that were either postponed, delayed, or just completely thrown away. There are student records that are lost. There are semesters where teachers can't record grades. So we have to bring solution. And I'm extending this clarion call to any and everyone that's watching this video, this interview, this conversation with my brother Mike Lee and myself. I have solutions that I would like to offer. I would love the opportunity to come either to your school in person or virtually to speak to your staff, to speak to the students, to bring back hope, to dispel fear, and offer solutions to the student body, to these leaders, to the decision makers, so that we can save a generation
that needs saving. Bad. Mr. Ronnie Mclaughlin Jr., I want to thank you very much, sir, for this exquisite interview with you. You've given us a lot of information tonight that we need to take home and we need to think about what's going on in our schools. For more on Mr. Mclaughlin, you can go to his Instagram page, which is Ron Mac Speaks. That is RonMacspeaks. Also, Chef Ron Mac. He is also a chef, ladies and gentlemen. So you definitely want to check out his chef page. And he is Ron Mac on Facebook. Can we give out your email address?
Yes, it is ronmacj@gmail.com. That is RONMACJ@gmail.com.
That's right. And we definitely want to take you up on your offer about you coming out to schools or coming out to speak. Please email him, please, if you've got anything that you might want from Ron, please, please, please email him. We're going to have Ron back to talk more on this situation, but next time we're going to be talking about some great dishes that his catering company makes. He has a catering company now in Miami, and he's doing great things. It's really great stuff, guys. So thank you, Ron, for joining us tonight. Thank you. This was an incredible interview. I really enjoyed having you on. I hope you had a great time tonight with us.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you for joining us right here on the Mike Lee Show, powered by IOM Network. Thank you all very much and have a good night.